I ironed that dress. Paid for half of it, too. I remember watching her walk into the room, graceful, glowing, the kind of woman I hoped she'd grow to be. For a moment I thought she might look my way and smile. I thought maybe all the years would gather in her eyes, and she'd see me. Really see me. But when she stood up to speak, lifted her glass so confidently, she didn't even glance in my direction. Her words came like a cold slap across a warm table. She said, clear as day, she's not my mother. She's just my dad's wife. And they laughed. Not everyone, but enough of them. That kind of laughter cuts. It curls around your ribs and stays there. I didn't say a word. I just sat there with my hands in my lap, wondering when exactly I stopped being someone worth acknowledging. I know you didn't come here by accident. Maybe you were just scrolling, maybe someone sent this to you, or maybe something in that one sentence, that she erased me in front of everyone, felt a little too familiar. And if it did, I want to thank you for staying. I don't know where you are, or what kind of table you once set, but if you've ever poured your time, your care, your whole self into someone, only to be treated like a stranger when it mattered most, then I want you to know, I see you. I really do. Sometimes the people we love forget us not because we weren't good enough, but because they never learned how to carry the weight of everything we gave them. And when they finally put it down, we're the ones left holding the silence. So if you're still here, still listening, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Maybe it's late where you are. Maybe you're in your kitchen, or sitting alone like I was that night, wondering if you mattered as much as you thought. You did. You still do. And if you've ever walked away from a room where your name was left out on purpose, where your love was treated like it never counted, I want you to tell me about it. Share it. Right here. I'll be reading, and I'll be listening, because sometimes the only thing more healing than telling the truth is knowing you're not the only one who's lived it. She was 7 when I first met her, knees always scraped, hair always in some kind of soft, stubborn tangle. The kind of little girl who didn't say much at first, but watched everything. Her father and I hadn't been married long when I came into their lives. Her mother had been gone for a while by then, off chasing whatever she thought was more important, leaving a quiet house and a child who didn't ask for any of it. I didn't come in with a plan. I didn't try to replace anyone. I just started showing up. One bedtime story turned into 2. One school pickup turned into 100. There were science projects on the kitchen table, tears wiped off cheeks after a bad dream, and tiny drawings taped to the fridge with shaky letters spelling out, I love you. The first time she called me Mom, we were sitting on the back steps after her first recital. She had forgotten half the steps and cried all the way home. I wrapped her in a blanket, sat beside her, and told her how proud I was anyway. And then, through sniffles, she said it. Soft and unsure, like she was testing the sound of it in her mouth. I didn't correct her. I didn't freeze. I just smiled and said, I love you too. Her father, he was gentle, always was, kind to a fault. But where I was firm, he was quiet. He hated conflict, always choosing peace over truth, even if it meant ignoring what was happening right in front of him. And for a long time, I thought we were doing all right. Our little family wasn't perfect, but it was steady, and it was warm. I figured, as long as I kept giving more time, more care, more of myself, everything would hold. But love, as I came to learn, doesn't always earn you a seat at the table. You can fill someone's world for years and still find yourself left outside the door when the guest list is made. I told myself, for too long, that love would be enough. That showing up day after day would count for something. But it's not always about what you give. Sometimes it's about what they're willing or unwilling to remember. 15 is a tricky age for anyone, I suppose, but for her, it was the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. It started small, so small I almost missed it. She stopped sitting with me during shows we used to watch together. Her answers got shorter, her smile less certain. I thought maybe it was just part of growing up, pulling away a little, making space for her own thoughts, her own identity. But then the phone calls started, quiet ones, behind closed doors, the kind where she'd come out of her room with a look on her face like someone had just handed her a brand new version of herself. Her biological mother had reappeared. Out of nowhere, she came back into her life with perfume and promises, expensive shoes and weekend plans. She was saying all the right things at just the right time. I remember watching her walk out the door one Friday evening, suitcase in hand, hair done, cheeks glowing from excitement. She didn't even glance back. And when she came home, she brought stories that didn't include me, laughter that I couldn't follow, and inside jokes I wasn't meant to understand. I started to feel like a guest in my own kitchen. My opinion didn't matter as much. My voice didn't carry the same weight. I'd suggest a meal, and she'd wrinkle her nose. I'd offer to drive her somewhere, and she'd already have a ride. Her father, always trying to keep things peaceful, told me not to take it personally. "She's just figuring things out," he said. "She'll come back around." But I wasn't sure, because when someone starts pulling away slowly, it's not always about distance. Sometimes it's about deletion. It wasn't overnight. It was gradual, quiet, like watching a photo frame you've loved for years slowly shift out of place. Then one day it's gone, and no one even mentions it. I didn't fight it. I didn't cry. I just kept showing up, kept making her favorite meals, kept folding her laundry just the way she liked, kept asking about her day, even when I knew the answers would be short and distracted. I convinced myself that if I stayed kind, if I stayed consistent, eventually the tide would roll back in. But tides don't always return to the same shore. And love, no matter how steady, can still be left waiting with the porch light on while someone else walks through the front door without ever looking back. I didn't stop loving her. I just started loving her a little more quietly. When the wedding planning started, I let myself hope. Just a little. I told myself it could be a new chapter, a chance to stand beside her during one of the biggest moments of her life, not just as a figure in the background, but as someone who mattered. I imagined holding her hand while she looked at dresses, talking late into the evening about color swatches and centerpieces, watching her face light up over little details. I imagined hearing her say, even once, "I want you there." But that moment never came. The first I heard of her choosing a dress was through a photo she posted, all smiles with her mother on one side and her best friend on the other. I stared at that photo for a long time, not out of jealousy, not even anger, but out of something quieter, an ache. The kind that doesn't shout, but hums under your ribs and follows you around all day. I told myself it was fine. I'd be there for the cake tasting maybe. But that came and went too. I wasn't asked for my opinion or even if I had any allergies. I offered to help. I offered more than once. She smiled politely, told me everything was handled, and then changed the subject like I hadn't spoken at all. What truly opened my eyes, though, was the program. She had left it lying on the kitchen table one afternoon. I picked it up, curious, and as I turned each page, I realized I wasn't in it. Not even a mention. Her mother was listed right beside her father, of course, with a lovely quote beneath their names. But me? Nothing. Not even a stepmother title. Not even a line tucked in at the bottom. I was invisible. I had to close it quickly, before she walked back in and saw the way my hands had started to shake. I thought maybe I was overthinking it, maybe it was just an oversight, until the rehearsal dinner was brought up in passing. Everyone already knew the time, the place, the plan. I hadn't even been told where it was. I had to ask. Her father gave me the address, almost as an afterthought, like someone remembering to invite the neighbor at the last minute. I helped pay for that dress, the very one she wore when she stood and erased me with a sentence. I remember holding my breath as I transferred the money, thinking how beautiful she'd look in it, and how proud I'd feel seeing her walk in something we picked together. But there was no we. There was only her, her mother, her circle. I was not even on the edge of it. It felt like being erased, not all at once, but in the careful way a name is rubbed off a chalkboard, slow, steady, intentional. Every memory I carried, every effort I made, every moment I thought we shared was suddenly weightless, unmentioned, unwanted, like I'd never been there, like none of it counted. And still, I told myself to go. I told myself to smile. Because sometimes when you've loved someone long enough, you convince yourself that being near them, even in silence, is better than being left behind entirely. But that kind of silence doesn't bring peace. It brings something else. Something colder. A realization that no matter how much of your heart you give, Some people will still look you in the face and pretend they've never seen you before. I arrived at the rehearsal dinner a few minutes early, hoping to find a quiet seat in the back before the crowd filled in. I kept my head low, greeted who I had to, smiled when it felt necessary, but mostly, I stayed close to the edge of the room. Everyone looked so sure of their place, like they had known each other for years. Like I was the only one still trying to figure out where I was supposed to stand. I watched her walk past me 3 times that night, without a glance. Not once did she meet my eyes. And even though I told myself I was used to it by now, something about being ignored that openly, it settles in your chest like stone. I was standing near the back wall, trying to stay out of the caterer's way, when a young woman in a crisp black apron brushed past with a tray of glasses. She paused for just a second, then turned to look at me. I thought maybe I was in her way, so I started to move aside. But she stopped me with a question. Soft, curious, with none of the stiffness everyone else had used around me. She said, "You're her mother, right?" And for a second, I didn't know how to answer. I looked at her, startled, and before I could say anything, she added, "She talks about how you used to read Little Women out loud, said you'd do all the voices." I don't know what it was about those words, but they cracked something open in me. Maybe because I hadn't heard anyone refer to me that way in years, not without a qualifier, not with any warmth. Just those few words, "You're her mother," spoken so simply by someone who didn't owe me a thing, and it brought a lump to my throat I had to swallow quickly. I nodded, barely able to get the word out. Yes, I was, at least I had been once. She smiled just a little, and said, "I always thought that was sweet," before turning back to her work. And just like that, she was gone. But that moment stayed with me the entire night. In a room full of people who seemed to have collectively agreed to forget me, that young woman remembered something that mattered. Something small, yes, but real. It meant someone had heard the stories. It meant my efforts, my evenings spent reading aloud to a little girl who curled against my side like I was the only world she knew. Those moments had existed, even if now they were buried under silk ribbons and seating charts. It didn't change the tone of the evening. It didn't change the words that would come later. But it steadied me, gave me something to hold on to when I felt myself shrinking into the shadows of that bright room. It reminded me that sometimes, kindness doesn't come from the people you raised. Sometimes, it comes from someone holding a tray of glasses, looking at you with eyes that still see your place, even when everyone else pretends you were never there. I kept telling myself to breathe through it, to sit with grace, to not let the ache in my chest show on my face. The rehearsal dinner was in full swing. Voices rising over one another, laughter circling the room like wine being poured into glass after glass. Plates clinked, silverware tapped, and everywhere I looked, people seemed to be soaking in the glow of something I had spent years helping build, yet somehow wasn't really part of. I folded my hands in my lap and watched from my corner, holding my smile like a weight I was too proud to set down. I could see her at the other end of the long table, radiant in a soft blue dress that complemented the flowers around her. Her father sat beside her, glowing with pride, his arm draped loosely over the back of her chair, laughing at something someone whispered. No one noticed I hadn't been included in the introductions. No one noticed I hadn't spoken a word all evening. Then she stood. Just like that. She rose with the kind of confidence I used to tell her to believe in. The room quieted. Everyone turned to listen. Her glass was lifted in one hand, her other resting gently at her side. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, there would be a mention, a soft line tucked between the others, something small, something kind. She began, "I want to thank my real family." Her voice was clear, her smile wide. "My mom, who couldn't be here, but who I love dearly." She paused for applause. Several guests clapped. I didn't move, I just looked down at my plate. Then came, and of course my dad, who's always been there for me. Another pause. Another round of nods and smiles. Then her eyes flicked toward me. Not warmly. Not with love. Just briefly, like she had rehearsed this moment and knew it needed to happen before she moved on. "And to my dad's wife," she said, her tone even, her smile still there, but thinner now. "Thanks for coming." Someone near the middle of the table let out a laugh. Not a belly laugh, not a surprised chuckle. No, this was sharp, biting, deliberate. It cut through the room like a blade, and nobody stopped them. No one looked shocked, some even smiled. I sat frozen in my chair, unsure what part of me she had just reached in and taken with that line. It wasn't the words alone. It was the finality of it. The way she had drawn a line between us, in front of everyone, and made sure I stayed on the other side. I wasn't her mother. I was her dad's wife. A guest at a dinner I helped fund, at a table I helped set, in a life I had helped build. I looked around the room. People were sipping their wine, nodding along, whispering. Nobody came to my side. Nobody looked my way with concern. I had never felt so surrounded and so entirely alone. My hands stayed folded, my mouth tight. I didn't cry. I didn't blink too fast. I just let the room tilt slowly, like the world had shifted an inch, and now nothing fit quite the way it used to. And I knew, right then, that no matter what I had done, no matter how many years I had spent reading stories, tying shoelaces, sitting in school offices, waiting outside dance rehearsals with snacks and water bottles, none of it had earned me a place in the family she wanted to show off that night. I was no more than a seat filler in the story she told. But even as my heart sank, something else started to rise quietly inside me. Not rage, not bitterness. Just something calm and steady and done. A realization that I didn't have to keep begging for space in a world where I was only welcome when it was convenient. And that maybe, sometimes, the only real power you have left is the moment you decide to leave the table altogether. I sat there a little while longer, long enough to let them forget I was even still in the room. The dinner carried on around me, full of noise and music and little toasts clinking here and there. I watched her laugh with her friends, lean into her father's shoulder, toss her hair back like someone who believed the night belonged only to her. And maybe it did. Maybe she had decided that her joy came with the cost of pretending I had never mattered. But even then, even after all of it, I didn't let myself break open in that chair. I stayed composed, steady, as if my stillness might be the only form of dignity I had left. I reached for my purse quietly, the way one might reach for their coat at the end of a long, disappointing play. No drama, no tears, just quiet motion with meaning behind every step. Inside, tucked safely in the lining, was a small box, nothing extravagant, just a square package wrapped in pale gold paper, ribbon tied once around with care. I had planned to give it to her after the toast. Back when I still believed there might be a toast for me too. It wasn't a gift meant to impress. It wasn't jewelry or money or something to flash for photos. It was practical, thoughtful. I had paid months in advance for the honeymoon suite at a quiet resort near the coast. It had a view of the water, warm lights, and a private balcony where I imagined she and her new husband would drink coffee in the morning and smile at how far they'd come. I booked it early. I booked it proudly. I was proud then. But as I walked past the rows of tables, I felt the weight of that box in my hand in a new way. Not like something I was giving, but something I was releasing. I stepped up to the edge of the gift table. No one noticed me. Not a single head turned. And I placed it down gently, right between the carefully wrapped boxes from her bridal registry. Not marked special. Not crying out for attention. Just there. Just enough. Inside that box was the envelope. The booking confirmation with one change added that morning. Cancelled. Along with a handwritten note, no longer folded, placed flat against the top so she wouldn't miss it. My handwriting still steady, still neat, still mine. It said, "This mother may not be by blood, but she knew when to walk away with dignity, enjoy the wedding, without me." I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't wait for anyone to notice I was gone. That night, I didn't take the high road. I didn't take the low one either. I took the quiet road, the kind that doesn't need an audience or an applause. The kind you take when you've given all you can and finally understand the only gift left worth offering is your absence. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I hadn't slept much, but I didn't feel tired. There was a strange quiet in the air, the kind that settles over you after something final has happened, like your body understands before your mind does, that there's no need to rush anymore, no need to rehearse the things you'll never get the chance to say. I stood by the window for a while, watching the light stretch across the lawn, slow and golden. It was peaceful in a way the night before hadn't been. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally stopped trying to fix what clearly didn't want to be held together. I made tea, the same way I always do, and let it steep while I sat down at the table and listened to the stillness. There were no texts on my phone, no missed calls, no one wondering where I was. I didn't expect any, and I didn't need them. I had already said what I needed to say, not out loud, but in the only way that still felt honest, by leaving. I didn't see her open the box. I wasn't there for the moment she pulled off the ribbon or peeled back the soft gold paper. I didn't see her face when she realized the honeymoon suite was no longer waiting, no longer part of the dream she had built on other people's backs. But I know she opened it. I know she read the note. I know because the silence that followed said more than any words could have. The note was written on plain paper. Not a card, not fancy, just simple and clear. I had folded it neatly, placed it on top of the cancellation form, and left it where she couldn't miss it. And I know, as surely as I know the shape of her voice, that she read every single word. This mother may not be by blood, but she knew when to walk away with dignity, enjoy the wedding, without me. That's all it said. No anger. No plea for understanding. Just truth. Clean, quiet truth. I imagine the room went still when she opened it. I imagine the laughter stopped, the small talk faded, and for a moment, the people around her didn't know what to say. Maybe someone tried to comfort her. Maybe her father asked what was wrong. Maybe she folded the paper quickly and tucked it under a gift bag, hoping no one else had read it. But the thing about truth is, it lingers. It stays in the air long after the note is put away. She had made her choice the night before. She drew her line. But what she didn't expect was that I'd finally stopped stepping over it to meet her halfway. She didn't expect silence in return. And that's the part that stings the most. Not the words someone yells at you, but the ones they don't need to speak, because they've already walked away. I didn't dress for the wedding that morning. I didn't sit by the phone waiting for an apology. I didn't pace the floor or question myself. Instead, I folded laundry. I watered the plants. I sat in my favorite chair with a book I'd read a dozen times. And for the first time in years, I let myself enjoy the peace that comes with choosing yourself after being pushed aside too many times. Because the truth is, when someone shows you that you're just a guest in their life, no matter how long you've lived in it, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is quietly pack up your place and leave the table. Let them sit with the empty chair. Let them wonder what it meant. Let them feel the weight of the silence you left behind. That note wasn't written to hurt her. It was written to remind her that I was never invisible. That I was there all along, loving her the best I knew how. And while I may not have shared her blood, I shared something deeper. Years, sacrifice, patience, care. She may have forgotten that, but I hadn't, and I wasn't going to spend one more day pretending I was the one who needed to prove my place. He called the next afternoon. I didn't expect softness, and I didn't get it. His voice came through sharp, low, clipped, just 5 words. You embarrassed her last night. Not, are you all right? Not, I'm sorry you left. Just that. I let the silence stretch a moment before I said, calm and steady, no, she did that herself. I just left before the last line. He didn't like that. I could hear it in the way he paused, like he was trying to figure out what to say next without setting me off. That's always been his way. Peace over truth, even if it costs someone else their dignity. He thought staying quiet meant staying neutral, but when you choose silence in the face of hurt, you're choosing a side whether you say it or not. I reminded him, not cruelly, just honestly. She learned that from you. You know, the pretending, the rewriting, the way you watch people get hurt and say nothing. I didn't need him to agree. I didn't need him to defend her. I just needed to say it out loud, for myself. He muttered something about how things got out of hand and how it wasn't meant to go that way. But we both knew the truth. He'd seen this coming for years and looked away every time. And now that the silence had cracked in front of 50 people, he wanted someone to blame who wouldn't talk back. But I wasn't holding the blame anymore. That weight wasn't mine to carry. While they were dressing in satin and pinning flowers to lapels, I was wrapping my hands around a warm cup of tea and walking out into the garden. The sun was soft, the sky open. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel forgotten. I just felt free. The house was still. No buzzing phone, no one knocking, just the sound of birds in the distance, and the wind brushing through the trees like it had nowhere else to be. I stood by the roses, blooming bold and stubborn after weeks of rain. I picked a few, just enough to fill a jar, and placed them on the table by the window. There was no rush in me, no wish to be elsewhere. I didn't glance at the clock. I didn't wonder what song they were dancing to, or whether my name came up in whispers. I didn't miss the speeches or the photographs. I missed nothing that didn't miss me. And for the first time in a very long time, I let the silence wrap around me like something kind. It didn't ask anything of me. It didn't erase me. It just held me in the truth I had finally chosen, to stop fighting for a seat where I was no longer welcome, and instead take back the peace I had once given away too freely. A few days later, I found an envelope tucked into the mailbox. No stamp. Just my name, written in her handwriting. I stared at it for a long moment before bringing it inside. I set it on the kitchen table and made my tea first, not because I was avoiding it, but because I needed to be steady before I opened it. When I finally did, the paper inside was plain. No card, no decoration. Just one line, scrawled with uneven letters like she'd written it quickly, or with shaking hands. You didn't deserve that. No explanation. No apology. Just that. I read it again and again, not because I needed more from her, but because it said just enough to confirm what I already knew. That she saw it now, that somewhere between the applause and the silence I left behind, she realized what it had cost me to sit through her words, and what it had cost her when I stood up and walked away. I didn't reply. I didn't start again. I didn't reopen a door I had spent years standing outside of. I folded the paper carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the drawer where I keep things that once mattered deeply. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. But in that moment, I felt something lift. Not everything, just enough. Enough to breathe without ache. Enough to know I hadn't imagined the years we had. Enough to finally put the story down, without bitterness, without hope. Just truth. And that was more than I expected. More than she'd given in a very long time. If they ever erased you from a story you helped write, if they stood in front of the world and introduced you like a stranger, just know this. Your silence, your dignity, your choice to walk away without shouting, that stays with them longer than any applause they chase. The absence you leave behind speaks volumes, and the quiet strength it takes to leave says more than any toast ever could. Thank you for sitting with me, for hearing this truth all the way through. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own, I hope you'll stay close. Subscribe for more stories like this, and if you've ever been left out of a story you helped build, know you are not alone. Thank you for watching.